We are going to be in Joshua chapter 6 this evening. Joshua chapter 6. We have the account of the Battle of Jericho. This is, as we've been looking at this, I've been pointing out the faith that Israel has at this point in time in comparison to the first time that they came into the Promised Land. Didn't make it in, and they sent the spies. And it's interesting enough that Hebrews 11 and 30 actually describes this event as being that of great faith in this time taking forth, and with the things that happen with Israel and the instructions that God gives to them. This is an act of great faith on their part in being willing to do this for many different reasons. For one, it's a pretty unique battle strategy. Hey, walk around the city 6 times, and then on the 7th day, or 6 days, and then on the 7th day, walk around it 7 times, blow your trumpets, shout really loud, and the walls will fall down, and I'll give you the city. That's a very unique, to say the least, a very unique strategy that the Lord presents to them. And in this, you have to think about them marching around the city like this. It places them at a bit of a trying to look for the word now. Open position and just marching around, and it's not just the people of war; it's the whole nation that's doing this and going around this, and it's just different in things. And so to trust the Lord with this, to do this, to not even try to change it, to not even try and help it along, it does show the faith that Israel has at this time, being willing to follow the Lord, as well with Joshua leading the people with this. We are going to be looking at the chapter. We'll go through it verse by verse, and then at the end I do have some archaeological evidence, some things that I want to point out, that I want to talk about, that will, as I would like to point out, as my case is, whenever Scripture says it, that's what it is. I like to look at archaeological evidence. I like to look at other evidence as supporting what God has already said to be true, not necessarily as that's the source of my faith, or that's the source of why I believe it, but it is supporting it, and I think it's always interesting to look at it. So at the end, we'll go back and review this and look at a few different archaeological things that has been found at the site of Jericho. So let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll get started with this. Lord, thank you that we have this opportunity to be here this evening, be able to study words, be able to learn from it. I pray that you would guide and direct us as we're studying your word now. Open up our hearts to it, that we can understand it, that we would hear it and learn from it, Lord. I pray that you would guide, direct me as I teach your word, that everything ultimately, though, would be for your honor, your glory, and your will. In Jesus' name, amen. We begin here and we look at the preparation for this battle that is taking place, and we see the Lord's plan in preparing this. Verse 6, it says, "Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in." We see that the stage has been set, and that Jericho and all the inhabitants of it are set up in town. They have locked up all the gates, and they are sitting scared, shaking in their boots. And it tells us that they are doing this because of Israel. Back in chapter 5 and verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass, when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of the Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel, until we were passed over, that their heart melted, neither was there spirit in them anymore because of the children of Israel." That we were told the last time we looked at this that they were very fearful of Israel because of the things that took place in the crossing of Jordan and the miracle that put forth here. And I talked about that, the crossing of the Jordan was not an event that was going to, its effects were something that could be experienced by those all the way up and down Jordan. This wasn't something that was confined to just where Israel was. This is a big deal that took place. Even back in chapter 2 and verse 9, whenever the spies are in the city and they're with Rahab, Rahab gives her reason for why she's helping the spies in verse 9, and that she says, and she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. That even before the crossing of the Jordan, they were already very fearful of Israel because of hearing about the crossing of the Red Sea, and also because of what they'd done to 2 other nations. And so we see that that has continued, even that they are still completely closed up. It may have been even, if you remember back when we were looking at when the spies were there, that we're told that they closed up the gate after the party went after the spies, after Rahab told them that they had left. And, it wouldn't be with the fear that was on there, it may even been that all the way up from that point until now, it had been closed up, and that they've been at least screening who was coming in and out after that point. You hear about a nation that you're very fearful of, that they got 2 spies into your city and that they're as close as they are, immediately you're going to start thinking there's a chance that they may send more into our city. That they may cause more problems for us, so we need to protect ourselves here. We see that they were very much so trusting the fortifications of their city to protect them. The walls themselves, it's supposed that these walls were somewhere between 12 to 14 feet thick. These are very large walls in size. It's very mighty fortresses, one to be feared. And I think it's one of the reasons the Lord chose it as the first battle, maybe Joshua, because it go to show how powerful the Lord is. The Lord, up to this point, has been making multiple things to show the strength of Israel, to show the strength of Joshua in following the Lord, proving that the Lord is with them. And this is what He's doing yet again. Verse 3 of chapter 6, He says, and ye shall, verse 2, and the Lord said unto Joshua, I see, I have given into thine hand Jericho and the king thereof and the mighty men of valor. The Lord tells him, He says, I have given this city, you will be successful. You will win this. But as we continue here, He says in verse 3, He has instructions for him though. Verse 3 says, and ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day you shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him. You see, the Lord confirms this to Jericho and tells them, though, that I do have a plan, though, that you have to follow. That the Lord has told them, I'm with you, and I'm going to help you, and you're going to be successful, but you have to do it my way. You have to do it in the plan that I've set before you, with the commands that I've set before you. Even if they don't make sense to you, even if they don't, you don't think it'll work, you need to follow it and trust me and have faith that it will work. And for this, it really does show us, it proves to us, as is the case many times, that without the Lord's plan, we cannot be successful. That God says He'll be with us, but we have to continue walking with Him, even if He is with us, even if He is desiring to help. If we don't choose to walk in His path, we don't choose to do the things that He set before us, then it is us that are not walking with God, not God walking with us. You know, I think about it with a child in the store. The mother or the parent is always willing to protect the child, to do what they keep the child safe in the store and these things. But sometimes Children like to wander off, right? And that's whenever there's risk of something happening to them, somebody taking them without the parent knowing, because the parent's not there to see, the parent's not there to keep them in the right place, to keep them safe. We stray off, then we can't expect God to be able to help us, because the way He said He would help us is with His plan. You have to listen. The plan, He tells them, they walk around the wall once for 6 days. And on the seventh day, they are to go around 7 times and blow the trumpets. When the people hear the final long blast on the 7th day, they are to shout. And the Lord tells them, and I will deliver Jericho to you. So I have a plan, a very easy plan. As far as sieges go, most sieges last many months, some even years. And God tells them, you're going to have a siege of 7 days. And you'll be successful. It's a pretty good plan. One that they end up obeying if they follow. Verse 6. It says, And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, Pass on and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And Joshua goes and gives the command to him. And one of the things I want you to notice here is that it tells us that the armed men are supposed to go in front of the ark, and it's showing that there's others that are coming behind that are not the armed men, that this is all of the children of Israel that are going around the wall at this time. Which is, I mentioned this isn't a plan that you would normally want to do, to take more than you just take the armed men with you. Especially the Ark of the Covenant as well. It's a very prized possession that they have, very important thing, but it symbolizes God being with them. They take it all, because that's the plan that God has set before them. We continue, and we see in verses 8 and 9, it says, And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests, bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns, passed on before the Lord, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the ark of the priests blew with the trumpets, and the reward came after the ark, the priests going on, blowing with the trumpets. You see, the people follow. Verse 10, And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth until the day I bid you shout. Then shall ye shout. They are instructed at this point in time to remain silent the entire time that they are circling the city, to not make any noise, to not talk at all amongst themselves, to remain silent. For some of us, that would be a really wonderful command. Remain silent. For others, that would be the hardest 7 days of their life. Unless this is the way that God instructs it to go, a very silent and very solemn time. Now, one of the things about this to think about in this, of course, I think the main point of this command, the way that God has set this up, is for Israel's benefit. To have Israel trust Him completely, and to do things, and the Lord is able to prove that it's His strength and He is the one that does it. But also you have to think about the effect that this would have on the people of Jericho, seeing them walking around you silently for these days. Wondering what's going to happen. You know about the Red Sea. You know about their previous successes. You know about the crossing of the Jordan. You got to be thinking, what do they have planned? Something that is very well studied, and something that is very important is the art of war within even the mind of your enemy. And I have no doubt that this had a very great effect on the enemy, because something that happens is that they had no idea what was going on here, and so most likely the whole city was swarming with rumors about what was going to happen. People's minds were going crazy, and a lot of times our mind is our worst enemy. So I can only imagine the unrest that was going on in the city of Jericho watching this take place. But of course, the focus here, the important thing is the Lord's power. But the Lord does, I believe, use things. The Lord, all knowledge, all wisdom is in agreement with God. He can use these things if He chooses to help work in these things, and at times He does. See verse 11. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about at once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, and 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns for the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew with the trumpets, and the armed men went before them. But the reward came after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And the second day they compassed the city once and returned in the camp. So they did 6 days. You see, for 6 days they do their one pass in silence, with the exception of the trumpets of the Lord. Then, verse 7. Not verse 7. The 7th day, they go around it 7 times. Verse 15, it says, And it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day and compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, Shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. I will imagine after all these days of being silent and the people of Jericho just hearing these trumpets, and now you hear this final loud trumpet, and then you hear the people shout. The excitement on the side of Israel and the fear on the side of Jericho. Because now things have changed. And, this is the 7th day. They've seen them go around. They're thinking they went around once all these other days. Now they're going around again. And then again, and again, 7 times. Imagine they're thinking today's the day. Today's the day that we find out what the Lord has in store for us. Now think about this, though, as we're going to see later on. There is also Rahab, our family, those that are with us during this time. And I can't help but think what Rahab is thinking during all this. Her confidence. That for people of Jericho, for the most part, this is fear when this happens, but for Rahab, it could be very much so joy in hearing it. Knowing that she's safe. Now, I can't help but think final trumpet and the things that will take place at the end. For many, it'll be fear. For those that are on the Lord's side, it'll be a day of rejoicing. Exciting. Continue. We see the Lord conquering Jericho, verse 17. It says, And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. We see that Joshua declares the city has fallen now, that Rahab will be spared. Verse 18, it says, And ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed, when ye take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel curse, and trouble it. Joshua provides this warning here, and he tells them, he says, and when you go into the city to conquer it, don't touch anything of it. Don't take anything, don't keep anything for yourselves, because the whole city is accursed. If you take it, it'll cause all of Israel to be cursed. And this is going to come into play not next week, following week, whenever we get into chapters 7 and 8. We'll see the effect of this and what took place because of one man that did not follow this commandment. The Lord told him and said, leave it all. Now, this is a very hard thing. You think about it, as is typical in all cases, when you conquer a city, you plunder it. It's a very enriching time for the conquering, the winning side. They're being told, don't hold on to any of anything. If they've been in the wilderness 40 years, they don't have much of anything. They don't have any comforts with them. And they're going to be in this city full of comforts, full of wonderful things. But the Lord says, no, leave it all. We see that some of it is to be kept for the Lord, though what we're seeing here is that this city is for the Lord. As the Lord delivered it to them. Verse 19, it says, but all the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. We're told here, this is a reason here too, is that the Lord's showing, He's saying, this is my city, and I'm the first one that's going to gain from this. The Lord's going to get His first fruits, as is always the case. Continue now, we see Rahab being spared. Verse 20, it says, so the priest shouted when the priest blew with the trumpet. And it came to pass, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox, and sheep, and ass, with the edge of the sword. I say that when the people shouted, the wall fell down. The people were able to enter into the city with ease. The Lord's hand is shown here, His power, His ability. We see as well that they have this command and they go in and everything is destroyed. Everything is killed. We're going to see later everything is burned. And the question that may very well enter your mind is thinking this is a pretty heartless thing to have all of these people killed and all of their things killed. Well, you got to remember, as is the case with anybody, nobody is without fault in the Lord. Nobody is without sin. And so they were a sinful people. It's not talked about. The focus is Israel and their victory and the things that the Lord's doing with them. But this was not a people without blame. And sin always has its punishment. And also we see that in the case of Rahab, she's given the opportunity to be saved. That the woman that is a believer and others that are with her, they also have to be trusting in the Lord in order to trust Rahab to stay with her and to not try and flee or to not do something else, but to just stay in their home. We see that there is the opportunity for those that did trust in the Lord to be spared. It is still righteous. Everything the Lord does is righteous, even if we do not understand it. In addition, the thing you have to think, the Lord is always being very specific in trying to encourage His people to keep away from the pollutions of the world, the idols of the world. This is something He's constantly telling Israel to keep away from all of these things. He spent 40 years basically purifying them as a people from all of the problems that came with them out of Egypt. So He's continuing with this, telling, we're going to keep you pure here and keep you out of all of these things. I don't want you taking any of those golden idols, and I don't want you taking any of these other things, because then idolatry can have its way in. Keep you pure. See 22, 23 says, but Joshua said unto the two men that spied out the country, go into the harlot's house, bring out thence the woman and all that she hath, as ye swear unto her. The young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brother and all she had, and they brought out all her kindred and left them without the camp of Israel. I have here the account of Rahab being spared along with all that she has, all those that are with her, all of her possessions. Everything is spared, and they take it and escort her and all of them back to the camp of Israel, protecting them as they were promised. Then we see right after that, verse 24, it says, and they burnt the city with fire and all that was therein. Only the silver and the gold and the vessels of brass and of iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive and her father's household and all that she had, and she dwelt in Israel even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. And Joshua adjured them at the time, saying, Cursed be the man before the Lord that riseth up and buildeth this city Jericho. He shall lay the foundation thereof, and his firstborn and in his youngest son shall he set up the gates of it. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was noised throughout all the country. We see this final thing here is that Joshua enacts a curse upon that of Jericho, and stating that if it ever is to be rebuilt, that the one that did it would lose his firstborn and his youngest in the work of this. And actually, if you go over into 1 Kings chapter 16, somebody didn't listen to this. 1 Kings 16, verse 34. It says, and in his days, in the days of Ahab, it says, did Hiel the Bethelite build Jericho? He laid the foundation thereof, and Abram his firstborn, and set up the gates thereof, and his youngest son Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Joshua the son of Nun. That this curse does indeed come true, and that later on this man loses both of them. One of the things I mentioned is that there is archaeological evidence of the things that take place here. There is this site, as it were, that is very well known, is not without its controversy, though. And one of the things that is controversial about it is when it fell. It is considered to be widely thought because of one woman that excavated it and looked at all of these things back in, I think it was the 60s or 70s, if I remember now. Made the decided that it was destroyed by the Egyptians in 1500 BC. And the main reason for this was based on the absence of pottery that would have existed in the time of Israel. If there were things that were not found that would have supported this time, which Israel is assumed to have come in around 1400 BC. However, the excavation area of this is somewhat of a argument of itself, because it's a very small area, and some argue that even the pottery that you would expect to exist during this time would have actually been in another area, that where they excavated was actually in the poorer areas, and you would have actually more expected to find those things in more of the upper echelon, the more wealthy areas in that sense. So it could be that it was just because it was not found. And there is some that is found that is supposed to possibly be from that time, though. Furthermore, in this, there is evidence because of the immense amounts of grain that is stored within the city, that it's supposed that it took place after the harvest time. And the Egyptians were very well known for having gone in and attacked cities right before the harvest. And the reason was because, as you would think, they can go in and they can eat of all the fields. They don't have to bring any food with them. They don't have to get in. If you're going to lay siege to somebody, you want to start it before they have plenty of extra food, right? Because you're basically trying to starve them out. And it's found within it, there's a very large amount of grain and stores within the city, suggesting that it was after the harvest. In addition to this, another point in the grain and these things being left in it was that grain during this time was a commodity, was very valuable, and it stands to reason ask why the Egyptian army would have left it all behind and not taken any of it, because it's not like just a little bit here and there. It is in very large amounts that it's found throughout the city. There's also plenty of evidence, though, supporting an alliance with the biblical account that this is the site of Jericho. One of the things about it that we've already kind of discussed is that the city was very well fortified, which we see within Joshua chapter 2, verse 5, 7, 15, chapter 6, 5, and 20. We see that, as we saw as well when crossing the Jordan, we see that they crossed the Jordan during the flood time right after the harvest, which, if you take into account all of the grain and the things of that sort, it would line up with that of being right after a harvest time. We see that another thing that you can realize with this, because of all of this food being left behind, all the possessions being left behind, is that the inhabitants were not able to flee, or not able to leave quickly, as we see taking place within the account of Joshua, because the city was closed up. Nobody was going in or out, and Israel was there afterwards. We see with Joshua's account that this was a very short siege, which again, when we're looking at the amount of food, if it was a long siege, as you would expect with the Egyptians or any other nation, that most of the food would have been used up, would not have been left behind in such high amounts. It's not normal for a siege to go that quickly, but we see that being the place and that it was only 7. There is also, in looking at the archaeological evidence, that the walls were completely leveled, except for one spot that we'll get to in a moment here. And then as well, the city was not plundered. Also, this city is found that everything was burned, and it was after the walls fell, and after whatever event caused the walls to fall down, which we know to be the Lord, is when it was burned, so that things were kind of knocked off and then kind of parried, and then the fire was on top of it, showing that quite a big event, what would be described almost as an earthquake, took place before the burning, which with the falling of the walls, however the Lord did it, would have caused a pretty great effect. Whether he caused an earthquake or he did it through other means, it would have caused this to take place. As well, there's some other findings specifically with the way that the wall fell. If you actually look at the back of your notes, there's a little diagram there that I did not make, I stole. It's very low quality as well. It's the best one that I was able to find with this, though. But if you look at it, there's the inner wall and there's the outer wall. And if you look at the outer wall, it's actually built up on top of an embankment with almost like a retaining wall. And looking at this is what they found with the archaeological data of this city, is that this is the way that these walls were built, is that it was built on top of this retaining wall. But something that was interesting about this is that the wall had fallen down, all the bricks had fallen down, basically creating what would be pretty much a ramp going up into the city. And it's believed with this, and looking at it, that if this was the Jericho account, that this would mean that when the wall in toppling over would make this perfect way to go in. And if you remember in verse 20, when it talks about the walls having fallen, it says, verse 20, so the people shouted when the priest blew the trumpet, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound, the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. That it's actually looked at here that would fit that, of going up into the city, having to climb this embankment that was with a ramp that was made perfectly by the fall of the walls. As well, another thing that's interesting about this city is with the account of Rahab, we're told that her house was built upon the wall, and that's how the spies were let out, was through her window. One thing that's interesting about this city that's found in this archaeological site is that there is one area along the northern side where about 8 foot of the wall remain, along with a couple of houses along it, or a few houses with it. Which, if you're thinking about how was Rahab saved, it would protecting just her house and those that are with her, while the rest of it all around falls down, is something that would fit right with that as well. As well, in being on the northern side of this, it also works with the spies that were there when she tells them to go into the mountains quickly after, and that being on the northern side, the place is a very convenient spot and very quick way for them to get up into that area to be saved. So it even fits geographically in that way as well. There was a lot of other things in it. That's just a cliff notes of what I was reading on this from a biblical archaeology. If you're more interested in it, I can give you the links to it. But I thought it interesting because, as I said, Scripture says it, I believe it's true. But it is always interesting to me whenever there's evidence found that shows the proof or can prove the Lord's account of these things, can back things up. I think of it as man discovering God's truths that God has always been saying, that God's always been teaching, and they've just confirmed it. Just because we don't know it doesn't mean it's not true. But it is nice whenever we find out things that, when we find this evidence that proves the things that God has always said. So. Do we have any prayer requests?